Mr. Henry was a very rich man. He had big houses, mansions, private jet cars, companies, lands, businesses, and workers who ran around to serve him every day. Everyone in the city called him the Billionaire of Hopeville. But deep down, Mr. Henry was a lonely man. He had 3 children, Michael, Rose, and Kelvin, and a wife named Mrs. Linda. They all loved money more than anything else. They never really cared about Mr. Henry's feelings. They only smiled when they needed something. One morning, Mr. Henry sat quietly on his bed and said to himself, "If I die today, will they cry because they love me or because they want my money?" He wanted to know the truth. So, he decided to test them. The next day, he called the family doctor and whispered, "Tell my family I am very sick. Tell them it might be serious." The doctor looked shocked. "So, are you sure about this?" Mr. Henry nodded slowly. "Yes, I need to know who truly loves me." When the doctor told the family that Mr. Henry was sick, the whole house became noisy. Mrs. Linda screamed, "Oh no! My husband is dying." Michael dropped his phone and shouted, "Dad, please don't die yet." Rose ran to her room and cried loudly. Kelvin even knelt down and prayed aloud. But their hearts were not really sad. They were thinking of something else. Rose whispered to her brother, "If Dad dies, I'll take the mansion by the sea." Michael replied, "No way. I'm the first son. That house is mine." Kelvin laughed and said, "All of you should relax. I'll take the cars first." They all pretended to care, but deep inside, they were fighting over what they would get. Suddenly, everyone started acting sweet. Mrs. Linda began cooking for her husband every morning. Rose brought him flowers and said, "Daddy, you're my best friend." Michael washed his father's car for the first time in years. Kelvin even stayed by his bed reading Bible verses. Mr. Henry lay there, pretending to cough weakly, and watched them all. He saw how fake their smiles were. He noticed how they counted his medicine bottles like they were counting money. At night, when they thought he was asleep, they would argue quietly in the hallway. If he doesn't recover, who will handle his company? Mom should get everything. After all, she's his wife. No, Dad promised me the business. Their fake love turned into open greed. The house became full of drama, noise, and fake tears. After 1 week, Mr. Henry called his lawyers secretly. He said, "Prepare a new will, but don't tell anyone yet." The lawyer asked, "What should I write, sir?" Mr. Henry smiled sadly and said, "Let's see how long they can keep pretending. When the time comes, I'll know who deserves what." He wanted to keep watching to see if any of them would truly care when there was no money talk involved. Soon, the news spread outside that the billionaire of Hopeville might die soon. Old friends who had forgotten him started calling. Some came to the house with fake tears. Even church leaders began to visit and pray loudly in his sitting room, hoping he would remember them in his will. One afternoon, as he lay on his bed pretending to be weak, Mr. Henry overheard his children fighting in the living room. Rose shouted, "You are selfish, Michael. You only care about Dad's company." Michael yelled back, "And you only care about his money." Kelvin threw a glass of juice on the floor. "You both disgust me." The argument got so bad that Mrs. Linda had to scream, "Stop it. Your father is still alive." Mr. Henry smiled sadly from his bed. "Now I know," he thought, "none of them truly love me. They only love my money." The next morning, Mr. Henry woke up earlier than usual. He sat on his bed and smiled quietly. His fake sickness plan was working. His family was showing their true colors. But now, he wanted to take it to the next level. Mr. Henry called his loyal driver, Peter, a humble man who had worked for him for over 20 years. "Peter," he whispered, "come closer. I need you to help me with something important." Peter looked worried. "Sir, what is it? Should I call the doctor?" Mr. Henry shook his head slowly. "No, I'm not sick, Peter. I only pretended to be sick to see if my family loves me, but they don't." Peter gasped in shock. "Sir, you mean you were never sick?" Mr. Henry nodded sadly. "Not even a little." Peter sighed deeply. "Sir, I always told you, love built on money never lasts." Mr. Henry smiled faintly and said, "Now it's time to teach them a lesson they will never forget. I want to disappear for some time. Let them believe I have died." Peter's eyes widened. "Sir, that's serious." Mr. Henry replied, "Yes, it's the only way to know who truly cares after I'm gone." 2 days later, news broke out. Billionaire Henry passes away after a long illness. The whole house turned upside down. Mrs. Linda fainted and was rushed to her room. Michael screamed and hit the wall. "No, he can't die yet. The will. We haven't even read the will." Rose fell to her knees and cried loudly, but her tears dried fast when she whispered to Kelvin, "I wonder how much he left for me." Soon, people from every corner came to the mansion. Friends, business partners, church members, even people who never visited before filled the compound. Some were truly sad, but many came for curiosity and property talk. 3 days later, everyone gathered in the big sitting room. The lawyer came in holding a brown envelope. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "before Mr. Henry passed away, he left this will behind." Mrs. Linda's eyes shone. The children sat up straight, pretending to cry, but waiting eagerly. The lawyer opened the paper and began to read. "To my loving family, my wife Linda, and my children Michael, Rose, and Kelvin, did I thank you for showing me who you truly are." Everyone looked confused. "I have seen your hearts, your greed, your fake smiles, and your love for my wealth instead of my soul. Therefore, I have decided that all my properties, houses, cars, companies, and lands shall be given to my loyal driver, Peter, who cared for me even when he had nothing to gain." The room went silent. Then boom. Everyone started shouting. Mrs. Linda screamed, "What nonsense is this? That poor driver." Michael jumped up. "No way. This can't be true." Rose burst into tears. "Daddy would never do this to us." Kelvin grabbed the paper and tore it in anger. "We'll go to court." The lawyer calmly said, "You may go to court if you wish, but the original copy is safe in my office. And the will was signed by your father himself." Chaos filled the mansion. Peter stood quietly in a corner, shocked and trembling. He never wanted trouble, but now, the entire fortune was in his name. Far away, in a quiet countryside, Mr. Henry was secretly watching everything on TV. He had asked a friend to record the whole scene and send it to him. As he watched his family shouting and fighting over the will, a tear rolled down his cheek. "So this is what they really are," he whispered. "Money truly blinded them." But deep in his heart, he still loved them and wanted to see if they would change after losing everything. He said to himself, "I'll give them time. I'll see who comes to Peter not for money, but for help, forgiveness, or love. Then, I'll show myself again." He smiled sadly and leaned back in his chair. The real lesson was just beginning. The mansion that was once full of laughter and servants became silent and cold. Everyone in the family was confused, angry, and broke. After the lawyer's announcement, everything changed. The bank froze all the accounts in Mr. Henry's name until the new ownership was fully approved. Peter, the driver, was now the legal owner of everything. Mrs. Linda screamed and shouted at everyone, "This can't be happening. How can a driver become the owner of all this?" But the truth remained: the mansion, cars, companies, and even the family's private jet were no longer theirs. Michael began to lose his mind. "I can't live like a poor man. I'll go to Peter and make him change his mind," he said angrily. Rose wiped her tears and said, "Maybe if we beg him, he'll give us something." Kelvin shook his head. "Beg him? Never. He's just a driver." But the next morning, something happened that humbled them all. Peter arrived at the mansion with police officers and lawyers. He looked shy and nervous, still wearing his old uniform. "Good morning, Madam Linda," he said softly. "The lawyer told me I'm now the new owner of this house." Mrs. Linda gasped and almost fainted again. "You? A common driver? You want to live here?" Peter looked down humbly and said, "Ma, it's not my fault. I didn't ask for this. Your husband's will gave everything to me." The police handed them a letter. They were ordered to pack their things and leave the house in 3 days. Rose started crying loudly. "Where will we go? I've never lived anywhere else." Michael threw his bag on the floor. "This is humiliation." Kelvin clenched his fists. "That old man destroyed our lives." Peter's eyes filled with tears. He didn't want to hurt them, but he had to obey the law. 3 days later, the proud family of the billionaire was thrown out of their mansion. They moved into a small rented apartment in the city. For the first time, they had to cook by themselves, wash their clothes, and even take public transport. Mrs. Linda couldn't stop crying. All my life, I lived in comfort. Now look at me, no servants, no drivers, no food like before. Michael went out to look for a job, but couldn't find one. Rose tried to use her father's name to borrow money, but no one trusted her anymore. Kelvin, the youngest, started hanging out with bad friends and drinking away his pain. The once proud family had fallen. Meanwhile, Peter's life changed completely. He moved into the mansion, but he remained humble. He helped the poor, fed widows, and built a small hospital in the village in Mr. Henry's memory. People started calling him Peter the kind millionaire. But even with all the wealth, Peter's heart was heavy. He missed Mr. Henry dearly. Every night, he would go to Mr. Henry's portrait and whisper, "Sir, I wish you could see how things have turned out." One day, Rose came to Peter's gate. She looked weak, tired, and hungry. Peter opened the gate and was shocked. "Rose, what happened to you?" Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry, Peter. I used to look down on you. I thought you were nobody, but now I see you were the only one who truly cared for my dad." Peter felt pity and welcomed her in. He gave her food, clothes, and some money. She cried and said, "Thank you. Please forgive us." Peter smiled gently. "You don't owe me an apology. You owe your father." At that moment, Rose broke down crying. If only he could hear me now, I would tell him I truly miss him, not his money, just him. Far away, in his hidden house, Mr. Henry was watching through a small hidden camera Peter had placed long ago. He wiped a tear from his eye and whispered, "My daughter has finally changed." But he wanted to see if the others would also change, or if greed still ruled their hearts. The days rolled into weeks. Peter continued to live humbly and help others, while Mr. Henry watched everything from his quiet hideout. He saw how Rose had changed, how she visited Peter often, helped the poor, and even prayed for forgiveness. But Michael and Kelvin were still proud and angry. They refused to accept their new life. One night, inside their small, broken apartment, Michael paced around the room angrily. "We can't live like this forever, Kelvin. That driver stole what belongs to us." Kelvin slammed his hand on the table. "I say we take it back. We'll find a way to make Peter give us the mansion." Michael's eyes burned with anger. "How?" Kelvin whispered, "We'll pretend to be sorry, pretend to change, just like Rose did. Once Peter lets us in, we'll make him sign everything back to us." Michael grinned wickedly. "Perfect plan, brother." The next morning, they both dressed neatly and went to Peter's mansion with fake smiles and humble voices. Peter was surprised to see them. "Michael, Kelvin, what brings you here?" Michael bowed his head. "Peter, we are sorry for everything we did. We've changed." Kelvin nodded quickly. "Yes, Peter. We now understand what Dad wanted us to learn. Please forgive us." Peter looked at them carefully. He could see through their fake smiles, but he said nothing. He invited them in, served them food, and listened to their sweet words. They laughed and acted like saints, but secretly, they were watching every corner of the house, looking for papers, safes, and keys. Little did they know, someone else was watching them too. That evening, as the sun went down, an old man wearing glasses and a gray suit walked into the compound. Peter saw him and smiled secretly. Michael and Kelvin turned to look at him. The old man walked slowly, using a walking stick, and said in a shaky voice, "Good evening, young men. I'm Mr. Henry's cousin from the village. I came to check how his will is being handled." Michael whispered to Kelvin, "He looks poor. Maybe we can use him." Kelvin whispered back, "Yes, let's act nice." They smiled at the old man. "You're welcome, sir. Please come in," Michael said kindly. But what they didn't know was that the old man was actually Mr. Henry himself, in disguise. That night, they all sat in the living room. Peter served them dinner. The old man, Mr. Henry in disguise, spoke slowly. "Tell me, young men, how do you feel about Peter taking over your father's properties?" Michael sighed and said in a fake gentle voice, We were angry before, sir, but we now understand. We just want peace. Calvin added quickly. Yes, we love Peter now. He's like a brother to us. Peter quietly watched them, but Mr. Henry kept asking questions. So, if Peter gives you back the mansion, what will you do with it? Calvin replied, we'll use it to continue our father's legacy. But Michael couldn't hide his greed. He blurted out, and of course, we'll also sell a few cars and use the money to live better. Peter looked down sadly. The truth was showing again. Mr. Henry smiled secretly under his fake beard.